play mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Chapter of APA and Chair of the New Urbanism Division, and I'm your webcast moderator. Today, Friday, March 17th, we will be hearing the presentation, A Dozen Tools for Accelerating Local Sustainability Leadership. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar to the right of your screen, or you can call the 1-800 number that's shown there in bold. For content questions related to the presentation, you can type those in the questions box located in the webinar toolbar, and we will answer those questions at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. On your screen is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions. Thanks to all those participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to their members. And if you're joining us today and you don't see your chapter or your division listed on the screen, we ask that you contact your division or chapter leadership and encourage them to join us. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Sustainable Communities Division, and we will learn a little bit more about them in just a few moments. You can learn more about them by visiting planning.org/divisions/sustainable. On your screen is a list of our upcoming webcasts. You can register for these webcasts by visiting our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And to log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, head over to planning.org and log into your MyAPA account, and then you can search for CM activities either by today's title or the webcast number, both of which can be found on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And our webcast has been approved for 1.5 CM credits, live viewing only, and we do have some recorded webcasts available for distance education. You can, again, just check out our webcast webpage for more info. And like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our sessions. And as always, we are recording today's webcast, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. And we will have PDF copies available for you to download on our webcast webpage. Okay, with that, I am going to turn it over to Jennifer Koch, and she will take it from there. Jennifer.
Great. Thanks, Christine. So yes, I'm Jennifer Koch. I'm a senior planner with Roadside and Harwell in the DC metro area, and I'm the former secretary-treasurer for the Sustainable Communities Division. The division supports planners who are committed to planning for sustainable communities by integrating all aspects of sustainability into our work through the combined economic, social, and ecological factors that shape our communities. Obviously, all of you share this goal and interest, so we're so glad that you're here. A quick thank you, as always, to our great group of sponsors. Thank you for all, helping us put on these types of events. And we are currently recruiting sponsors for this year. If you're interested, you can contact Meryl, whose email is shown on the screen. And we are also offering some special sponsorships for the annual conference reception. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to Scott Turner at apascd@gmail.com. Thanks again. Today's webinar will examine major U.S. tools for assessing the sustainability of neighborhoods, cities, and their components. As we all know, there are a lot of tools out there, which is wonderful, but it can be pretty overwhelming figuring out what to use. So our speaker will go over a range of tools and reviewing them each in terms of, their scope, intended users, etc. And he will also present a set of criteria for helping us decide what tool is best for our needs. And our presenter is Elliot Allen, who is an urban planner and specialist in urban sustainability assessment and rating. He is a co-creator of the Lead for Neighborhood Development Rating System and has directed certification reviews of over 200 LEED ND neighborhoods. Elliot is also a co-creator of the EcoDistricts Protocol and administrator of its certification program, as well as a technical advisor for the Sustainable Sites and STAR Community Rating Systems, and a Sustaining Places Plan Reviewer for the American Planning Association. So clearly has a lot of knowledge about this topic. He is also, in addition to his instructional work for Transformative Tools, he is a founding principal of Criterion Planners of Portland, Oregon. So as Christine said, you can direct any questions to the chat box. We'll get to them at the end of the discussion. Here's our contact information. Again, feel free to reach out if you're interested in volunteering or you have any ideas for webinars or other events. We'd love to hear from you. With that, I will pass it off to Elliot.
Thanks, Jennifer. Is my screen okay?
Yep, looks great.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Elliot Allen, and appreciate Jennifer's introduction. So I'm going to just get us started and move ahead. Today's presentation is organized in 5 parts. I'll start with some context about the value of urban sustainability appraisal and qualities to look for in assessment and rating tools. And then I'll profile the dozen tools that we're highlighting today, including, as Jennifer mentioned, their scope and structure and how they're applied. And then I'll conclude with some tips on selecting a tool and turn it over to all of you for your questions. Here are the learning objectives for the presentation. At the conclusion, I hope you'll have a general appreciation of why sustainability appraisal is worth doing and the different qualities that assessment tools possess to make that happen. Mainly, I want you to be aware of the 12 tools that are being profiled, so you'll be able to follow up on the ones that interest you the most. We are going to have to treat them pretty briefly because of our time constraint, but at least you'll have a game plan for moving on to further exploration. And when you do begin to follow up and explore further, you'll have some guidance on what to look for and ask about. To find the dozen tools that are being profiled today, we start at the transformativetools.org global registry, the organization that I'm representing today, transformativetools.org. When you open the registry to its full extent, this is what you find. Tools from every part of the world, including a couple of dozen in the U.S. alone, there on the left. In total, the registry currently has about 65 tools from some 22 countries. So from this universe of possibilities, today we're going to limit ourselves to some major U.S. options. For that screening, here's the definition I'm using for today's presentation. First, we're talking about tools that apply beyond the building wall, from the project site up to entire cities. Second, the tools must address sustainability in all of its dimensions, environmental, social, and economic. Third, they need to contain some element of quantitative appraisal, whether it's simply an assessment in original resource units like gallons of water used, or whether it's a rating on a relative scale of merit, like 4 stars or gold. And then last, the tools must be publicly available on a national level in the U.S. There are dozens of great local tools, one-off local custom tools, as well as consultant systems that rate urban sustainability. But we're going to have to save all of those for another day. So that definition produces this group of a dozen tools. Again, all of them marketed nationally in the U.S. And for today's presentation, I've organized them into 3 groups of ascending physical scale, beginning on the left with urban components, and then neighborhoods, and then entire cities. So we've identified our tools, but why care about applying them in the first place? What's the point? Well, there's some pretty compelling reasons. First, we are a profoundly urban nation, and getting more so all the time. Our collective future is definitely tied to our urban communities. Second, the decisions we make about growth and development are highly durable. We have to live with our built environment decisions for a long time, decades if not centuries. Third, and perhaps most alarming, is the urgency we face in dealing with critical sustainability issues. The scientific warnings we've been receiving lately about climate change, water resources, food supplies, just to name a few, are getting increasingly strident, making it very clear that we need to pick up our pace all across the board if we're going to successfully meet these challenges. And it appears that we'll need even stronger local leadership in the face of likely federal rollbacks across the same spectrum of sustainability issues. So the bottom line is we need leadership. We need it now more than ever, and we need it applied in ways that can protect and accelerate our sustainability gains. Here's a clear picture of what's at stake. Taking just one sustainability indicator, in this case, in this example, carbon dioxide emissions per capita, which is on the vertical axis on the left. What you're looking at here are two different Toronto neighborhoods. In the left column, a low-density mono-use neighborhood, and on the right, a higher-density mixed-use neighborhood. Each column contains the CO2 emissions from neighborhood energy use for transportation and building operations, as well as energy embodied in construction materials. The delta or difference between the two is about 60%, very significant. Imagine the same kind of graph for water or waste or other key performance indicators, and you begin to see how important neighborhood and district scale assessment can be in terms of identifying the magnitude of opportunities and then devising effective strategies to capture them. And that brings me to the two main themes of my presentation that you'll hear me return to again and again in the tool profiles. First, the potential for using these tools to foster and cultivate leadership across all segments and sectors of a community. And second, using the tools to accelerate progress by invoking the measure to manage principle, particularly emphasizing performance results. Or to express it in a couple of questions, number one, are we doing the best we can? And number two, are we moving fast enough? Let's talk about leadership first. If we're looking for bold, innovative action and stretching for excellence, my suggestion is these tools are ideal incubators for growing and equipping leaders. Whether it's citizens learning to judge how green a development proposal is, or planning practitioners like yourselves getting trained in new interdisciplinary skills, developers who want to distinguish their projects in the marketplace, or local governments using continuous improvement loops to operate their infrastructure. The net effect is wider and deeper leadership that's putting pressure on the accelerator. To incubate and launch the kind of leadership we need, what's encouraging is appraisal tools are increasingly rewarding or requiring stakeholder engagement in the assessment process, which creates exactly the kind of Petri dish conditions that can foster leadership. In some cases, the tools are actually process frameworks rather than just the traditional menu of prescriptive standards. What you see here is an example from the EcoDistricts certified tool where the assessment process is grounded in a stakeholder collaboration commitment called the Declaration of Collaboration on the left. And the process has to be inclusive of the groups on the right who have a stake in the assessment and how its results will be used in the district's action plan. Now let's turn to my second theme, which is using the tools to accelerate or pick up the pace of sustainability gains. My approach is based on the famous Peter Drucker maxim that you can't manage what you don't measure. But more importantly, when you do measure, the evidence convincingly shows rates of improvement can increase over time, especially when the appraisal process includes performance reporting and a feedback loop for continuous improvement. You can see that clearly here, where 23 cities in a ULI-sponsored initiative began tracking 5 key sustainability indicators in 2007, and you can see the general trend line they're achieving. So whether it's increasing high school graduation rates or employment in disinvested areas or transit ridership, the appraisal tools we'll be looking at can bend the curve. Here's a graphic example of how the curve bending can occur. In this case, it's a credit from the Envision infrastructure rating system that we'll be looking at. And what you're seeing here is, as leadership takes hold and stakeholders strive harder, the sustainability payoff gets greater. In this case, more points in a project's rating score. It's not a straight line, but it's a non-linear upward curve. That's not to say that this and other tool scales aren't steep hills to climb, and that's why building leadership capacity is so important, especially for some of the more aggressive sustainability standards. An upside, though, to strong standards and verified performance is the emerging ability to monetize their benefits. This is an example from Miami Beach, where developments receive fee refunds, shown in the red circle, based on their level of sustainability certification, shown in green on the left. As the certification level increases, so does the refund, which makes sense because the community's infrastructure is seeing a much smaller impact from projects as they climb the rating curve. Here's another example of the same principle at work in a new neighborhood in Portland at the Hazelo on 8th project, where the lead ND Platinum design included on-site treatment of 100% of the project's wastewater, which also earned the developer a systems development charge refund of over $1 million in recognition of the saved capacity in the municipal wastewater system. So before profiling the dozen tools, let's review the qualities to look for in a tool and how it gets applied and whether it's a good fit for your organization. Let's drill down on the qualities you see listed here. The topical scope and geographic scale of a tool are fundamental characteristics. What's its topical scope? Does it address all the dimensions of sustainability? What's the physical scale of the assessment? Does it look at part of the city or an entire city? This is how we've organized today's group. Also, some tools distinguish the kind of built environment they can be applied to, whether it's planned or existing or both. And some have minimum requirements for eligibility. For example, sites requires a land area of at least 2,000 square feet, and a lead ND requires at least 2 buildings. The heart of an appraisal tool is the set of criteria that are used for assessment or rating. These determine the kind of inputs that are required and the kind of output that's going to get produced. Considerations that you should keep in mind include whether the criteria are mandatory, prerequisites, or elective options, or a mix of both. Whether the criteria are prescriptive, specifying a certain way a measure has to be accomplished, or whether they're performance-based, where a threshold is established and the ways of accomplishing that threshold are left to the creativity of the project team. The adaptability of the criteria to local conditions and priorities can be an important consideration in some cases. especially when the adaptation can be part of stakeholder engagement, that leadership cultivation process I spoke about. How the criteria were formulated and vetted is also worth noting to confirm that they do represent a broad-based consensus on best practices. And lastly, whether the criteria are regularly updated by the tool provider in order to stay current and be continuously improved. The appraisal procedure can play out in several ways, either as a first-party self-assessment that occurs once, or as a second-party review conducted by tool provider staff, again on a one-time basis, or as a third-party review conducted by an independent reviewer on behalf of the tool provider. And then another variant is cases where certification has to be maintained by ongoing performance reporting, and maintenance reviews are performed by either second or third parties. The time frame required to complete an assessment can vary considerably depending on the tool and its appraisal procedure. As I've illustrated here with examples from today's tools, time frames can range from several hours for self-assessment checklists like Green Communities offers, up to years for immersive process-based approaches like EcoDistricts Certified. Here are the main cost categories to keep in mind when you think about budgeting for appraisal tools. You've got provider fees, reference materials, possibly training. There's your time and expenses to prepare documentation and participate in the process. And the possibility of ongoing costs if performance reporting and certification maintenance are involved. Take a look at the organization that's providing a tool and its track record. Are its tool users getting the kind of support that's listed here, including documentation, training, and in some cases, hands-on assistance is provided. Ultimately, you need to end up determining a tool's overall usefulness in relation to your needs. How well aligned is the output with your goals and objectives? How much value does it add to your work, to your neighborhood? How does it move the sustainability leadership needle? And from a practical standpoint, is it efficient? Is the benefit that it produces at least equal to or greater than the effort it takes you to apply the tool? Excuse my switching metaphors from the Petri dish to something more utilitarian here, like the Swiss Army knife. But my point is, in summation, that assessment tools are much more than just green ratings. They can add value in a host of ways. They're terrific compendiums of some of the best expert thinking on best practices. They make great curricula for public and professional education. And as we begin to go through the dozen tools here shortly, think about using them as frameworks or platforms for collaboration and collective impact. Also, several of the tools offer self-assessment options, which is a great way to gauge how the tool works for you. And as we've seen, it's likely that trends like performance reporting will enable measurements that are going to be strong enough in the future to be monetized. Okay, let's get started with the tool profiles by beginning with the urban category, which has tools for sustainable landscapes and infrastructure. Our first tool is Sites, also known as the Sustainable Sites Initiative. Its focus is the landscapes of communities. That includes private land development, public landscapes, such as parks and plazas. Sites is provided by Green Business Certification Incorporated, or GBCI, which is an affiliate of the U.S. Green Building Council. Sites was originally developed through a partnership of the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center at the University of Texas at Austin, partnered with the U.S. Botanical Garden and the American Society of Landscape Architects to create the system. It's a traditional point-based rating system where project plans are scored according to a mix of mandatory prerequisites and optional credits, and the total earned points equate to a final rating. The system consists of the 10 sections that are shown on the right. Those contain 18 prerequisites and 48 credits, so it's fairly extensive. The sections, as you can see, are organized to follow a typical development process, starting with pre-design assessment and culminating in operations and maintenance. Again, as I said, credits are a mix of performance-based measures and prescriptive practices to encourage teams to be as flexible and creative as they design the landscapes to be appropriate for their context and intended use. Sites credits are worth a total of 200 points, and there are 4 levels of project certification, as you see here, based on the score thresholds. For certification, project plans are submitted to GBCI, and they perform a second-party review of compliance and credit earned, and then award certification. The rating system and scorecard are downloadable at no cost, and you can purchase a technical reference guide for about $200. The certification procedure is a one-time review and scoring of project plans. The charge for that is $8,000. That includes a $2,000 registration fee, and that's priced for GBCI and ASLA members. Non-members, the rates are slightly higher. Assembly of project documentation and completion of the site's forms is going to represent another cost in person hours for a project team, typically several dozen person hours to complete the process, which can take 3 to 4 months. To date, about 50 projects have been certified throughout the country, and notably the U.S. General Services Administration recently announced that all new federal landscape projects are going to have to obtain site certification. In addition to certification, GBCI also offers training in the use of the tool and a new professional credential, the Sites AP, or Accredited Professional. Returning to the primary questions of how these tools can foster leadership and accelerate sustainability gains, Sites moves the needle in 2 important ways. First, it focuses exclusively and deeply on its subject matter, in this case, landscapes. And by doing that, it delivers the strongest possible focused outcome relative to that subject matter. And second, it has provisions for community outreach, public education that create the kind of favorable conditions for cultivating leadership that I spoke about earlier. Our next urban component tool is Envision. This is a rating tool for all types of civil infrastructure. It includes transportation, water and wastewater, recreation, energy facilities, airports, any kind of civil infrastructure. It's provided by the nonprofit Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure. It was founded by several partners, the American Public Works Association, American Society of Civil Engineers, American Council of Engineering Companies, as well as the Usefulness program for sustainable infrastructure at Harvard University. Like Sites, Envision is a traditional point-based rating system. Project plans get scored according to 60 optional credits in the 5 categories shown on the left, and awards are made at 4 levels of total point achievement, as you see on the right. Projects can begin with a no-cost pre-assessment checklist to tentatively gauge their rating, and then if they desire, they can move on to an ISI-administered third-party verification or certification. The rating system and checklist are downloadable at no cost. The verification procedure is a one-time review of plans. ISI is currently only available for projects in the planning phase, but in the near future they expect to release companion modules for the construction and operation phases of infrastructure projects. The charge for project verification is based on a project's construction value, And it begins at $10,000 for projects of up to $5 million in value. Higher rates apply to non-members. An assembly of project documentation, again, will represent another cost to the teams in person hours. The overall process can be completed within a few months. And to date, about 20 projects have received awards throughout the country. And notably, local jurisdictions, such as Los Angeles County, are beginning to require Envision review of capital improvement projects. In addition to project awards, ISI also offers training in the use of the system and a professional credential, the Envision Sustainability Professional, or ENVSP. In terms of moving the sustainability and leadership needle, Envision is notable in two respects. First, it's a vehicle for the civil engineering profession to participate in sustainability planning and decision making. And it encompasses the types of infrastructure systems that communities are relying on to hit their sustainability targets. So it's utterly relevant. Second, it specifically rewards projects for stakeholder involvement and collaboration, again, creating those conditions we want that are favorable for fostering leadership. As a footnote, by the way, it seems likely there's going to be some kind of congressional action on infrastructure investment. And whatever form that does take, it's going to be a great opportunity to assess those investments through a sustainability lens. So if there are civil engineers or capital improvement planners in your organization, be sure they're aware of Envision. Okay, let's move on to the second category, which is neighborhood scale tools, where we're going to profile 6 systems. The first neighborhood tool is 2030 districts. That's available for existing neighborhoods with a focus on central business districts. It's not a traditional rating system, but instead it offers a process and assessment framework and targets for local groups of major property owners. 2030 Districts is a program of the nonprofit organization Architecture 2030, which is seeking a carbon neutral building sector by the year 2030. These are the performance targets that each 2030 district commits to achieving. It's a very straightforward set of 3 measures: energy use, water use, and transportation greenhouse gas emissions, coupled with some very ambitious reduction targets, and then eventually carbon neutrality. There are no points or scoring in a 2030 district. Instead, members share their raw consumption and emissions data on a regular basis, often quarterly meetings, and they pool their resources to leverage technical assistance that they share, to gain access to low-cost financing, and to pool their purchasing power when they're making sustainability improvements. The 2030 website describes the performance targets, and it offers information on different options for organizing a local district, such as incorporating a new nonprofit or adopting a similar mission for an existing organization. The makeup of district governments does need to be at least 40% property owners or developers, 20% professional service providers, such as architects, engineers, and then 20% community stakeholders. Today, about 15 districts are operating around the country, and several more are in the process of organizing. There is no national fee schedule paid by local districts, and member costs for participation vary from district to district, often just nominal annual dues. In terms of moving the sustainability needle, leadership needle, 2030 Districts is an impressive tool. First, it's all about grassroots collective action and peer-to-peer learning, some of the best conditions possible for fostering leadership. Second, the evidence so far from the operating districts is that measuring does matter, and in many cases, the close tracking and continuous improvement loops have allowed their targets to be achieved either early or exceeded. Our second neighborhood tool is EcoDistrict Certified, which is available for existing and planned neighborhoods of any type or size. Instead of a traditional green rating approach, assessment in this case is carried out as part of a local district's formation, planning, and performance reporting process. That process is codified in the EcoDistricts Protocol. EcoDistrict Certified is provided by the nonprofit organization EcoDistricts, which is based in Portland, Oregon. The certified tool is organized as an interlocking framework of three components. First, at the center of the process are three imperatives: equity, resilience, and climate protection, which districts must commit to acting on. Second, there are 6 priorities that define the scope of a district's roadmap or action plan in the middle tier. And then last, on the outer tier, these elements play out in 3 implementation phases: formation, road mapping, and biennial performance reporting. There are no points or scoring. A district achieves certification by completing the first 2 phases and then maintains that certification through biennial performance reporting, using locally selected indicators, by the way. Certifications are based on third-party reviews of a district's work product, including a declaration of collaboration, a roadmap, and progress reports. The protocol is downloadable at no cost, and a certification handbook can be purchased for $30 to $45 depending on membership status. The charge for certification is $10,400. That includes a registration fee, and then $1,200 every 2 years for certification maintenance with that performance reporting. Assembly of documentation in all 3 phases is going to represent another cost in person hours for a district team. That process could take anywhere from 1 to 3 years. The tool is just launched in late 2016, so no districts have been certified yet, but outside of the certification process, there are already about a dozen operating and emerging eco-districts around the country that have self-organized and embarked on their own action plans. In addition to certification, EcoDistricts offers training and convenings on neighborhood sustainability, as well as a professional credential, the EcoDistricts Accredited Professional, or AP. The needle is moving here in some pretty significant ways. First, at its heart, EcoDistrict Certified is really, it's a leadership academy that's embedded in a neighborhood sustainability planning process. It starts with a commitment to equity and inclusiveness. It requires collaborative governance, and it reinforces the district accomplishments with recognition, all conditions that engender leadership. And then second, it requires some pretty ambitious performance targets, including carbon neutrality. And it uses ongoing performance measurements in a continuous improvement loop, bending that curve over time for greater gains. Our next neighborhood tool is Green Communities, which focuses on affordable housing as a key ingredient for neighborhood sustainability. It's available for new construction projects as well as major renovation projects. It's provided by Green Enterprises, a nonprofit with a long track record in advocating, financing, and building affordable housing. Green Communities is structured as a traditional point-based rating system. Project plans get scored under the 8 categories you see here, using 80 prerequisites and optional credits. They're a mix of prescriptive and performance criteria. To be eligible, projects have to include affordable housing, and Enterprise defines that as 60% of area median income for rentals and at or below 80% of AMI for units that are for sale. Project can use a pre-assessment checklist to gauge their rating and then submit for certification if they desire. There's one level of certification, and new construction has to earn at least 35 points. Major innovations have to earn at least 30 points. The Green Communities rating system and criteria are downloadable at no cost, and there's also no charge for certification, which occurs in a two-step process: a pre-build review, and that's followed by a post-construction, post-build final review. Green Communities was introduced about 12 years ago, and to date, dozens of projects have been certified across the country. It moves the needle in several respects. First, it's the only tool of the ones that we're looking at that focuses on affordable housing, which I think we'd all agree is one of the greatest challenges facing community sustainability these days. Second, it requires stakeholder convening in a charrette fashion, and then it goes on to promote resident engagement and continuous improvement through performance monitoring. All of the ingredients that we've mentioned that are conducive to sparking leadership. Enterprise, by the way, has also done some of the best documentation of the costs to participate in the rating system and the savings that people have achieved. Next neighborhood tool is Living Community Challenge. This is a holistic and aspirational rating system available for both new and existing neighborhoods. It's provided by the International Living Future Institute, which also operates the companion Living Building Challenge, a rating system for green buildings, and also JUST, a social justice label for organizations. The Living Community Challenge is organized into 7 categories or petals, which you see here. They contain 20 mandatory imperatives. There are no optional credits or points in Community Challenge. Instead, to certify, projects have to achieve all of the imperatives. These are a mix of prescriptive and performance criteria. Projects do have the option of certifying individual petals or the entire set. The challenge rating system, or as they call it, the standard, is downloadable at no cost along with other supporting guides. The certification process occurs in 3 steps. It begins with a master planning phase, followed by construction phase, and then it concludes with certification once the project is occupied and has 12 months of operating data that's been compiled. The Institute uses a combination of second and third-party reviews during the process. The challenge was introduced about 3 years ago, and to date a half a dozen projects have registered around the country, and several pilot tests have occurred or are underway. In addition to certification, the Institute also offers training in applying the tool. And when it comes to moving the sustainability leadership needle, Living Community Challenge is one of the most aggressive. First of all, its criteria are mandatory imperatives. You're either all in or you're not. So it's a total commitment. And second, the imperatives themselves are a really impressive set of aspirational standards. They range from net positive energy, water and waste, to requirements for social justice, the public realm, and resilience, including disaster preparedness. So it's a rigorous and comprehensive set of criteria. Next neighborhood tool is LEAD for Neighborhood Development, or LEAD-ND. Its focus is large master plan projects, and it's only available for new neighborhoods. There are actually 2 separate ND rating systems. One is called ND Plan, and the second is called ND Built Project. They both have identical content and procedures. The only difference is, as you might imagine, ND Plan is for proposed projects that have not been constructed, and ND built projects is available for projects that have been completed. In all other respects, they're essentially the same rating system. So for purposes of today's webinar, I'm treating them as a single tool. LEED ND is provided by the U.S. Green Building Council, and it's part of the LEED family of green building rating systems. But ND is unique amongst the LEED family in that it was originally developed in a partnership between USGBC and the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Congress for the New Urbanism. It's a traditional point-based rating system where project plans are scored according to a set of mandatory prerequisites and optional credits, and the total earned points then equate to a final rating. The system's structured in three main categories: smart location, neighborhood design, and green construction. And then each of those categories contains what are primarily prescriptive criteria. ND is a fairly prescriptive approach. Projects are certified on the 4-level scale shown in the upper right, with 40 points being the minimum for certification. Submissions are processed by Green Business Certification Incorporated on behalf of USGBC. They use a combination of second and third party reviewers. The ND rating system is downloadable at no charge, and the technical reference guide can be purchased for about $200. The procedure is a one-time review and scoring of project plans, and the cert fee is based on project acreage. That begins at $19,500 for the first 20 acres, including a $1,500 registration fee. Assembly of project documents and completion of LEED forms will represent another cost in person hours for a project team. That's going to be typically several dozen or perhaps 100 person hours to complete the process, which can take up to 3 to 4 months. To date, about 175 projects have been certified worldwide, and the majority of those are in the U.S. And in addition to certification, USGBC does offer ND training as well as a specialty credential, the LEED Accredited Professional, or AP, for neighborhood development. When it comes to moving the sustainability leadership needle, ND is notable in a couple of respects. First, perhaps its strongest distinguishing standards are the criteria delineating where growth and redevelopment can occur most sustainably. It focuses on growth near existing infrastructure and amenities, and it also delineates where growth should be prevented or discouraged. Sensitive wildlife habitat, ag lands, steep slopes, so forth. ND also rewards community outreach that engages stakeholders throughout planning and construction, including an optional charrette. And lastly, it's proven to be a really useful set of standards for adaptation by local governments in their plans and development regulations, particularly the CNU originated neighborhood design criteria. Okay, the last neighborhood tool, it's a brand new system in pilot status called LEED for Communities. It has an identical companion tool called LEED for Cities that I'll address in the next city group of tools. But LEED for Communities is intended for any geographic area smaller than a municipality, including neighborhoods and districts. It's provided by the U.S. Green Building Council, and it's part of the larger family of LEED rating systems, including neighborhood development, or ND, that we just looked at. Where ND is only available for planned neighborhoods, however, LEED for Communities can be used by both planned and existing neighborhoods. Communities and its companion program, LEED for Cities, share a common web portal and certification platform called ARC. Going forward, USGBC is going to be shifting its rating systems, as well as those that operated by its affiliate, GBCI, onto the ARC platform. So they'll have greater cross-tool integration and efficiency in operations. LEED for communities is a point-based rating system, but not in the traditional sense of mandatory prerequisites and optional credits that earn points. Instead, it uses 14 customer-reported indicators in the 5 categories you see here on the left to annually tabulate an overall sustainability score on a scale of 1 to 100. So communities collect and submit annual data for the 14 indicators, along with engagement and planning documentation. And they're certified annually on the point scale you see beneath the computer monitor, with 40 points being the minimum for certification. So in contrast to a LEED ND project that gets scored by optional credits and certified once at a single point in time, LEED for communities is going to rely on mandatory performance data for key indicators to certify annually on an ongoing basis. USGBC is still rolling out documentation, but the website does have a description of the 14 indicators and process steps. Cert reviews are performed by GBCI with a $2,500 registration fee, and the cert fee itself is based on a community's geographic size, starting at $10,000 annually for areas up to 19 square miles. Because the program is brand new, in fact, again, technically it's still in a pilot trial status, there are no certifications yet. The tool moves the sustainability leadership needle in a couple of notable ways. It's the first attempt on a neighborhood scale to move from analog or static ratings to a more digital, performance-oriented rating that begins to approach being dynamic. As real-time sensor technology and smart cities emerge, this is a rough example of how urban sustainability is likely to be assessed in the future. The tool also requires community engagement and inclusive action planning, which, as we've discussed, is the fertile ground we're looking for to cultivate leadership. Okay, last category, cities. These are tools that address entire jurisdictions. Our first city-scale tool, it's also available for counties, is the APA program called Comprehensive Plan Standards. It's the outgrowth of APA's larger initiative called Sustaining Places, which recognize that city and county comp plans are ideal vehicles for addressing sustainability challenges. APA is currently pilot testing the tool, and a decision about more permanent operations is expected in the near future. It's structured in 3 categories of rating criteria: principles, processes, and attributes. You see the subcategories of principles listed on the right, beginning with a livable built environment. If we drilled into the process category, what they're looking at in there is authentic participation and accountable implementation. And inside of the attribute category, the criteria relate to consistent content and coordinated characteristics. In total, there are 85 criteria capable of earning 255 points, and levels of achievement are awarded using the percentage of points you see in the lower left. The tool and its application procedure are documented in PAS Report 578 that can be purchased from APA. To date, the program's gone through 3 rounds of pilot testing with several dozen jurisdictions. The most recent round just got completed, and I would imagine at the national conference in New York City in May, they'll be announcing the awards from that latest round. And again, a decision is expected in the near future about whether the program is going to continue on a permanent basis. If APA does decide to continue it, it becomes a needle mover in two respects. First, it's performing essentially a sustainability audit of what's arguably the most consequential plan that a community maintains. And second, it's structured to enable local self-assessment, where conversations begin and leadership emerges. So it's a very worthy tool with a valuable role to play. Our next city-scale tool is the Sustainable Communities Program, operated by the nonprofit organization Audubon International. Not affiliated, by the way, with the more widely known Audubon Society. AI is a separate nonprofit. It's not a traditional point-based rating system. Instead, it takes the kind of process-based approach that we saw earlier with 2030 districts and EcoDistricts certified. There's a three-stage process shown on the left. Stakeholders work through the 15 focal areas that are listed on the right, and certification is based on completion of the process. A really interesting feature of the program is a process management team where the community actually gets a sustainable community staffer assigned on a one-on-one basis to help them through the process. The program is well documented on the Audubon International website. Handbooks are available for registrants once they get into the process. The fees are very affordable, down in the $500 to $1,000 annual range, depending on community sector type and process stage. The larger cost for localities is going to be the commitment in person hours for undertaking each stage, which in some cases can take up to a year each. To date, about a dozen communities have been participating or are participating in the program, ranging from something as large as Riverside, California, down to Hilton Head Island in South Carolina. Sustainable Communities is moving the sustainability leadership needle in three notable ways. First, it's process-based. It's all about engagement and sparking leadership among the participants. Second, its organization and deployment are really amenable for small and medium-sized jurisdictions, especially when they're taking their first steps in organizing a sustainability plan and program. And Sustainable Communities offers a great framework for those steps that's A, comprehensive, and B, adaptable to local issues and priorities. Our next tool is Lead for Cities. This is the companion to the neighborhood version called Lead for Communities that we looked at a few minutes ago. It's identical in all respects to Lead for Communities, except the geographic area involved, in this instance, is an entire municipality. You access Lead for Cities in the same way as you did for communities, and that's through the ARC platform, ARC web portal. And the cities tool functions in the same way as communities. Users report 14 indicators in the 5 categories on the left. That generates a score on a 1 to 100 scale, and 40 or above receive certification. And that's recalculated annually with fresh data from a city. Okay, our last city sales tool is the STAR Community Rating System. It's available for municipalities as well as counties. STAR is provided by the nonprofit organization STAR Communities, which is dedicated exclusively to helping jurisdictions use the tool to advance sustainability agendas. The system is structured as a traditional point-based rating system. In this case, local government plans, policies, and programs are scored under the 8 goal categories you see on the left. Those contain 44 objectives and about 500 optional measures. Those represent a variety of prescriptive and performance actions that local governments can take pursuing state sustainability. And then certifications are awarded according to the point scale that's shown on the right out of a total 750 possible points. The rating system can be downloaded at no cost, and a technical manual can be purchased for a couple $100. The cert fee is $3,000, and there's an optional annual charge of $1,000 for jurisdictions that want to participate in the annual reporting program. To date, about 50 jurisdictions have been certified across the country, and several more are going through the process on a regular basis. STAR also offers training in the use of the system. It's a needle mover. First, because the sole purpose is fostering leadership, and the provider's mission is exclusively focused on that outcome. Second, the rating system is a tremendous compendium of the best thinking, with hundreds of local government practitioners that volunteered to formulate the standards, so it's a great resource. And then lastly, the tool rewards monitoring and evaluation where results are tracked. They're used in continuous improvement loops to accelerate gains. Okay, having zipped through a dozen tools rapidly and being able to only describe each one of them briefly, I encourage you to visit the provider websites for the latest complete information. Their programs, the procedures, and the fees sometimes change, so it's important to stay in contact with the tool providers. I said I wasn't going to show any local tools, but this is so good I wanted to sneak it in. It's from Oberlin, Ohio. It's a municipal partnership with several collaborating organizations. And its significance is it reports sustainability in real time. I know we've all seen a lot of community dashboards in recent years, but to my knowledge, this is the only one that's up and running, providing real-time results, which can be enormously empowering for sustainability initiatives. So just as a footnote, kind of a bonus here, I encourage you to visit this Oberlin system. Let me move on quickly and wrap up. Quick comments about tool selection guidance. Make sure this geographic scale, the topical scope, and assessment criteria are relevant to your needs. Do they fit with the users in your organization and their skills? Consider all of the costs involved, both direct and indirect, and check with others who've used a tool and can share their experience with it. And then finally, figure out how efficient the tool is for you and ultimately how well aligned it is for your goals. We're out of time, so to get more information on tool selection tips, there's a downloadable fact sheet on the resources page at Transformative Tools, so I encourage you to get a copy of that, take a longer look at tool selection. Let's wrap up by revisiting the learning objectives. I hope you now have a general appreciation of why sustainability is worth assessing at urban scales and the kinds of tools that come into play, particularly the 12 that we've profiled, and that you've got some guidance on how to evaluate them and make selections when you do explore them further. I'll conclude by returning to my original two themes that I'm repeating here for emphasis, which is the ability to use the tools to lead and to accelerate. Or to rephrase it as a challenge for you, I can put it to you in 3 questions. Are we doing the best we can? What progress are we making? And are we moving fast enough? It's been a pleasure presenting today, and I appreciate your participation. For more information about the tools that we examined, as well as many others, please visit the Global Registry at transformativetools.org. And at this point, again, thanks for the participation, and I'll be glad to take questions for the time we have remaining.
Great. Thank you, Elliot. We do have quite a few questions, so I'm just going to dive right in. The first one, has there been any effort to combine the cost for certification when projects want multiple certifications? For example, combining multiple certification processes into one process to reduce the combined cost.
That's a great idea. To my knowledge, it hasn't been attempted, with an exception for the LEED family of rating systems. There are some pricing advantages if you're using different types of rating systems within the LEED family. But in terms of something that crosses from tool provider to tool provider, I'm not aware of that, but it's a great idea.
Okay, thank you. Any of these evaluation systems that you discussed today, are they linked, any of them linked to funding? Meaning, is there any funding available for using a particular certification program or process that you're aware of?
To help defray the expenses?
Yes.
Yeah, there are some. The U.S. Green Building Council has been able to get funding from the Bank of America, as an example, to award grants to projects that are running affordable housing projects through the LEED ND process. And there are some other tool providers who've been able to subsidize, if you will, or mitigate the expenses in those kind of ways. So there are some opportunities out there. There's not a lot of them, but some of them. The other option that you could think about would be several foundations, philanthropies, are very interested in these kinds of tools. And I'm aware that people like Bullitt, Kresge, Johnson, they've made grants to help recipients go through the process.
Okay. We're going to keep on the line of cost. The next question is, for residential areas, sustainability is nice to support, but those types of projects tend to be a lot more costly to buy. It seems that those with money can support these, but others are forced to continue to live in the suburbs and other areas. Please comment.
If the question is about a bias in the tools, in that they might possess an urban focus.
I'm thinking perhaps more it's if you're in a smaller town or suburban area, you're not in a big urban or a large municipality where you might have some of those funds, and you might have more folks interested in supporting these types of efforts.
Oh, well, okay.
That's my take.
Yeah. Well, a great example is Audubon International's Sustainable Communities Program for smaller, medium-sized jurisdictions that may not have all kinds of fancy, sophisticated resources. That's a very accessible, easy to navigate process that's really affordable and doable for modest organizations. So I wouldn't be put off in the sense that these tools are too much of a heavy lift for smaller organizations, especially the ones that offer the pre-assessment checklists. Again, Enterprise Green Communities is a good example there. You can be a small town or a small developer or a practitioner in a small organization and get great value out of using a tool like the Green Communities checklist.
Thank you. Next question. This is your 30-second elevator speech. Why would a city want to invest time, money, resources in completing one of these certifications? What are the direct, tangible benefits?
Well, first and foremost, as a consequence of going through the process, the city is going to achieve greater sustainability with fewer pollutant emissions, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, lower costs to operate its infrastructure on a life cycle basis, greater public health as a result of investments in walkability. So the act of going through the criteria and measuring yourself up to those standards and then pushing yourself to do the best you can is going to generate immediate, enormously valuable, tangible benefits. The other thing you're doing on a more intangible level, I guess, that's worth mentioning is you're publicly affirming the city's commitment to these sustainability objectives. You're recognizing the achievements of the citizens, the volunteers, the staff, everybody who works to make it happen. And all of that reflects very positively on communities nowadays. Communities that are becoming known for their green or sustainability brands are seeing benefits economically and socially that argue strongly for the value of these kinds of certifications.
Let's keep digging on this topic for a moment. So specifically, let's talk about economic development. What are the direct benefits for, let's just say, a small industry to choose community X over community, Y? If community X happens to have some of these ratings, in your experience, have you seen that if all things are relative, that industry will choose or understand the value of some of these ratings and, go with a community that finds these sustainability, topics important?
I think there's a growing body of very convincing empirical evidence that it is a tiebreaker. You can look at economies around the country, whether it's Austin or Denver, here in Portland. The green economy is a real phenomenon. Just look at the real estate industry. Buildings and land developments that have green certifications are getting sold or leased up quicker and at higher premiums than the non-green competitors in the marketplace. And for a manufacturer, an employer who's considering moving to a community, in terms of attracting and retaining employment talent and the kinds of livability that the employee households are going to want and expect, to be able to point to these certifications and appraisals as evidence of that, I think it is becoming enormously important in economic decision making.
Great, thank you. Next question. This is interesting. When we're talking about higher density cities with a lot of these programs, do they take into account that after a certain threshold of increased density, we might eventually be reversing sustainability? Is there a threshold in any of these systems?
That's an excellent question, and the questioners put their finger on a real weak spot for all of the tools, and that's sort of the inherent internal trade-offs that you have to face. the example described here is, higher density versus open space, or you talk about in economic development versus environmental protection. So there's definitely a trade-off in balancing that has to occur. Regrettably, not all of the tools have built-in mechanisms, to make those trade-offs explicit and to help the users, figure out when enough is enough, and they might be exceeding reasonable density, in the example they asked about. So that's something to keep in mind. The academic literature on these appraisal tools does explore this phenomenon, and I would refer the questioner and others who are interested in this to the bibliography that's on the resources page at transformativetools.org, because there is some good academic investigation of this. So far, the tool providers are still reacting.
Thank you. Within these tools, how do we rate the human experience?
Well, that varies considerably from tool to tool. Some of the older ones, not so much. If there's a weakness to LEED for neighborhood development or LEED ND, I guess it comes to that, the absence of a social or human experience dimension to it, more brick and mortar. At the other end, the newer tools are really showing an exciting concern with these kinds of criteria and how they need to be addressed. EcoDistricts Certified is a good example. Some of it is in LEED for cities. And the human experience in these is indicated by criteria such as education, high school graduation rates, grade-to-grade elevation rates. On the economic side, job skills, unemployment. On the social side, what kinds of social networks are available, events, organizations. So there's an increasing attempt to characterize and assess the human experience. So it's happening, it's coming.
Okay, thanks. So a proposed federal budget was released yesterday, and it is quite possible that many environmental programs are on the chopping block. For example, the star rating in the proposed budget would completely disappear. So understanding that there's some volatile, potentially some volatile things happening, is now the time to invest in this, or should we be waiting to see how things pan out, especially for those communities that might be relying on financial support?
It's a good question, a very timely question, obviously. And first of all, let's be clear about the names of tools and which ones might be in the chopping block. When you mention STAR, you may be referring to the EPA-sponsored energy efficiency program, which is not the STAR community program that you see here on the screen, the city scale tool. None of the programs that you see on the screen are jeopardized by federal budget making. These are all programs operated by nonprofit organizations, and changes in the federal budget aren't going to directly, put the continuation of these tools at any jeopardy. Now, having said that, some of the tool providers, because they're nonprofits, do rely in some cases on federal assistance, and so some of the tool providers may have their operations curtailed in some fashion, but I would imagine they're going to backfill that with other sources, philanthropic sources perhaps. So that's one. And I guess number two, my emphatic reaction to the question is, this is exactly the time that communities do need to invest in these kinds of tools. Because if we are going to experience some kind of a rollback in federal or national level initiatives and standards, given the crises that we're facing across the board, whether it's climate change, affordable housing, I mean, you name it, this is precisely the time that localities, as they always often have to do, is they're the first responders. And so it's equipping themselves with these tools that I'm suggesting is the best possible thing we can do now, because we're going to need these kind of tools now more than ever.
Great, thank you. In your, and I think this will probably be our last question, in your opinion, do these tools help people to think in a more sustainable way, or is it just a mere checking off of the boxes to receive some type of certification? In other words, does this really help give us a global perspective, or is it more about, really getting into the weeds and checking off boxes?
Well, and that's a good question, and it comes up. There's the potential to fall in the weeds and get too wrapped up in how many kilowatt hours, a particular credit is, can earn. But frankly, for me as a practitioner, in some sense, the greatest value is the educational value. And in other words, if everyone who's with us today does nothing else but simply go download these tools and put them on the bookshelf, what you will have created is, is an instant library or compendium of some of the best thinking and insights into sustainability, at the urban scale that are out there. So I think the tools have tremendous value as educational curricula, whether you're doing it with the general public to bring them up on the learning curve. I've done workshops where we've just used the tools as frameworks to discuss the issues. Or whether you're a practitioner in a design shop and you're using them to try to push yourself, to a higher standard you weren't aware of. So at the end of the day, getting into the weeds and going through the checklists and earning the points and getting the gold stars is terrific, and there's a lot of benefit to that. But I do believe at the root of it, they really are going to be able to teach us an awful lot about how to go forward. Okay. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I think this was really great. We had about 400 folks on today's webinar. This is a timely topic. So Elliot Allen, thank you for joining us today. Jennifer, if you're still hanging around, thank you as always, and the Sustainable Communities Division for sponsoring today's webcast. And again, this webcast is recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube and it'll pop up. And we will have a PDF of the presentation available as well shortly on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. So again, thanks everybody, and have a good and safe weekend. Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.